Alright, hello guys, and today I am here to rank all the new units we currently have. So yeah, sorry about the delay with me not making any videos as the hurricane and all that other stuff happened. The hurricane and then me not having any light, and then actually coming back and then wondering where to actually start from. So I just decided I'd start from here. So since most of the other content I've been probably pretty late to it already, so it doesn't really make any sense for me to go back and make a video on that. So I might as well just think of something new and out of the box instead of what I usually do. And so that would have already been covered by multiple others. So yeah, that's what we're here for. We'll rank all, well, I could say rank and give my own experience on each of the two units, as you can see here with Shadow and Alpha, and then this Epsilon Beta, and then the two dudes on this rerun banner, which is Shadow and Aurora, and Zeta and Delta, which would be all the two units in the game. And luckily, myself, I pretty much have all the dual units, so it helps in that regard as well. Even though Shadow and Alpha is new, I just got Zeta and Delta recently. I have been trying to make some use out of them as well. But yeah, for Epsilon and Beta and Shadow and Aura, that one should be way easier to do since I've had them for a way longer time. So yeah, to start, might as well start with the new Shadow and Alpha, of course. So pretty much, what I've seen with the new ultimate technique is that it's pretty OP. Like from when I tried it out, it is between like 5 million to like 9 million. Well, this one, if you awaken it, well then it can do 9 million. But then outside of the awaken, it's the regular. From what I've seen, it does like 5 million, which is pretty OP considering that we're not really ult spamming or more should I say in technique spamming or so. And then of course the shell side, pretty OP and busted for PvP because he gives himself this huge buff of 50% damage and 50% crit rate and 50% crit attack. It pretty much just means he gave himself like demon power. And if you're wondering what that means, it's yeah, just well, not really demon power, but it's the strongest sword version. But demon power, but with the speed, but you replace speed with crit attack, and that's pretty much what you get the Shadow. And this makes him hit really hard, especially since both of his pre-atomic and phantom strike are AoE attacks. It pretty much means that you can literally paralyze your enemy and then finish them off before your enemy even moves. Or you could of course just kill with the pre-atomic. Since the founding dude, he gives himself a ton of buffs. And of course when you awaken him, you get even stronger. And the alpha side, typical buffing. It is interesting what they did to spread out their buffs. Like they put the attack and crit attack here, they put speed here, and they put extra attack here, and then debuff cancellation here, and then crit attack, crit rate, and crit attack. And you can see that they put the damage inflicted here, so and here as well. So she gives pretty much all buffs, but it's not just in one skill most as people would want, but it's all over the place. So each time she casts a skill, you get a buff, which is also pretty good, really. Instead of it all being on one skill, and then if that skill isn't casted, your team is pretty much just begging for a buff. And for the strike combo, it seems that they realized that multiple hit combos were OP as to what they gave the original Shadow Pistol Alpha. They just made this one do a single hit, but give you a damage inflicted bonus, which means that you want Alpha to be moving like in the last position so you can get the most damage. Well, like last or second to last position. You want to maximize on the buffs you get and the damage you deal in a strike combo. And the shadow side, inflicts damage on enemy and then damage after, which we have seen this before. It's on this young blue shadow over here. Gosh out the night, inflicts damage on single enemy and inflicts damage on strike combo, as well as the demonic paladin Olivier, as you can see here. And I will say that every time a character gets this, like the demon paladin and young shadow, it has some pretty strong DPS. So So it gives this shadow the pretty much all-rounder that his skills are made for PvP as well as doing good in PvE as well. As his pass is pretty much just renamed stun, which makes him OP. And then not only that, he inflicts weakness and then does an extra skill hit, AoE hit, and cancels your shield as well. So you pretty much can't really hide. You just have to accept your death with this one, really. He does cancel buff effects, but invincibility does kind of like wear out by the time he gets this skill, and you'll pretty much, well, the fight is pretty much over by the time he gets this skill as well. They are pretty OP unit. The shots are going to be very strong, though it is better to start off as the alpha side for the boss. Then boss really make the shots I hit harder. It's pretty much by starting off as buffs. Starting off with you getting yourself an attack buff is why other duos are better to start off with, like the Epsilon Beta here. They grant us an attack buff, which is good instead of lowering the enemy's defenses. And the same thing for this Zeta and Delta. I will start off with the R side, which is the Delta side that grants herself an attack buff. So yeah, granting yourself the attack buff always plays out better than just going for the straight damage route, really. As well as they both have weakness, so it doesn't really need to be said that one side you need to start off as one side, but it's just better to start off as the alpha side of the unit. Their new ultimate technique is something interesting since it can't be spammed, so realistically, it would be better to say HT spam, that's the technique. But yeah, it raises the damage limit, cancels all buff effects, grants a ton of buffs, and inflicts some damage. So yeah, as you can see there, it goes up, gets 2 extra hits, and grants overdrive crit rate, and a ton of buffs to all eyes. It's honestly crazy how good this unit is. So far right now, I'd say they're the best unit in the game, like AD Marsh, PvP, and they're doing well for PvE as well. I will say though, that the event boss is white instead of blue, so that will give it and offer the type advantage to show their true power, but then again, we'll have the Armageddon coming to do that. So yeah. So in my opinion, they're pretty much like the strongest duo and like the best unit in the game right now. That's pretty much just because of how they like dominate and work so well to not only buff the element into oblivion compared with the other alphas on the team, of course, but they also can do a ton of damage. As well as introducing the new mechanic, dealing a ton of damage, buffing, etc. They just dominating everywhere really. And next is the Epsilon Beta. As you can expect, they were the first to do so. Our creep with this one was huge. Like they had pretty much everything. As you can see, attack buff, crit rate buff, and they also did a ton of damage since they had extra damage per sound seal stack. Which, if you're wondering how to get that, it's in the kit right here. It says each time buff is granted by itself, grant sound seal. So yeah, anytime Epsilon counts uses this, or even the combo, yeah, you get a stack of this to deal the extra damage. As well as they introduced something new at the time, which was weakness, and this allows you to pretty much just do an extra hit on the opponent. And if you have a ton of buffs, this can easily be pretty OP, as it turns this into a 6 from a 3 hit ult to a 6 hit ult, and turns the awakened state from a 5 hit ult to a 10 hit ult. So if you can do all that while being on the damage limit, which is like 499 right now, well then yeah, you'll be dropping literal bombs, like 10 times 499 or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, it just makes them hit super hard, really. The weakness buff that they introduced to the game is pretty good. Right now, pretty much like the Epsilon side is the better side, of course. I've mentioned before with the attack, we're starting off the attack buff and the damage inflicted buff as well. And of course, our gear also granted a ton of attack, like literally every 10 seconds, raise the attack of all allies for 10 seconds, and then lowers attack of all enemies for a word seal. And how to get the word seal, you just start off as the beta side, Anytime you inflict a debuff, you grant word seal. So pretty much it's whenever you inflict any of these, like lowers accuracy, lowers attack, and of course lowers defense and damage received. So yeah, that would pretty much serve as Beta being the debuffer and Epsilon being the buffer. But really what you want more is the buffs instead of the debuffs. Debuffs really don't matter much. That's why the Epsilon side is still pretty much better, and why this unit is still pretty relevant because the buffs are still insane. Now I will say though that I did see a tank out damaging them, which did kind of lower my opinion of them, but still, they're still pretty OP, still a must have for the blue element. Insane power creep, insane unit. Though of course, since they're the first unit, that just means that they're pretty much like the worst one at this rate, since the new con we got more complicated kits, better kit, harder bots and stuff. As you can see, their single hit skills aren't really helping as much now, as you can see with other duos. How they all have like multiple hit ultimates and skills. As you can see, the multiple hit ults and skills are there, as well as just giving off better buffs compared than with Epsilon and Beta. Because yeah, as the game gets older, units have to get better. So yeah, that's why in my opinion they're like the worst two right now. But they're still pretty powerful and still a must-have for the blue element. Another bad thing is that if you like re-rolling, since now is a good time to re-roll. If you re-roll and get all three duos like Shaw and Alpha, and then the two duos on this rerun banner, your Shower, Aurora, and then Zeta Delta, I wouldn't really say it's worth going for these guys. If you can't get them at the start, I wouldn't say it's worth re-rolling if you already have all three. It'd just be better to keep all three and just hope to get them in the future, I guess. But that's probably unlikely. I mean, you could get them on this paid banner, but yeah, only if you have the money and want to do it, of course you can get them. They're still a pretty good unit. Definitely worth it if you can get them. But outside of, but if you're not able to, it's not really worth to give up the 3 dues that you can get already for free gems and have to use the paid gems to get them. So yeah, pretty much like the worst, but still OP. So now to my So pretty much not really my favorite, but the one that has impacted me the most, the Shadow and Aurora. Like last year when these guys dropped, yeah, they really messed up PvP, especially with like the idols. They were pretty much invincible, and you could just start off the Aurora side. This start as well as literally OP. Like as I said before with weakness, it pretty much just adds a times 2 multiplier to hits. So this would pretty much just turn into a 10 hit AoE attack, and of course, you get extra damage from each enemy multiplied by bleed effects, which you could literally get 7 of right here. So yeah, not only would you be doing a 10 hit attack, but you'd also be doing 30%, well, more like 210%, or 300% extra damage because on the bleed effects, depending on what awakening you have this on. As you can see, 10 awakening, 10 inflicts 10 bleed or 7 bleed depending on the awakening. You of course multiply that 7 by the third year, as well as the weakness, multiplying every year by times 2, so yeah. Like I says, inflict additional damage based on the skill user's attack when attacking affected enemy for the duration of the effect. So pretty much all these hits just go from 5 to 10, and with the bleed multiplying this, it's a pretty OP combination. Of course, the shadow side, of course, is the better part, which was pretty interesting at the time, considering that it was the aura side I was buffing you, and the shadow side just pretty much buffed himself. But I did end up figuring why, as to why the shadow side was better, and it was pretty much because like aura had more skill hits. So if you start off with the shadow side, you could pretty much transfer all of his buffs to aura, and that would make the Scar Icicle and Scarlet Rain. Well, I don't think you usually get the ultimate since Ray doesn't run on spamming the hidden technique, but you would often get a very powerful Scarlet Icicle, and for some reason they also gave Aura a multiple hit combo. So yeah, it will grant 2 demon power to 2 allies, as you can see here. It's pretty much 100% damage to 50, 100% crit rate, and 100% speed to 2 allies, which is honestly insane. And not only that, but it's doing tons of damage. Like literally multiple hits of tons of damage. Thanks to the boss from the shadow side. And the shadow side is pretty much as well also good for PvP, but R was better, as you can see. He also gave him the AoE combo, which was pretty cool for story and anything that had a lot of enemies. And of course, our gear here gives you a ton of buffs and shield damage. Don't mind when you really use the ultimate. The way they did their passive was interesting. Each time activates normal attack for the shadow side, and each time they activate skill 1 or 2 for the Aurora side. Unique would happen. Me personally, I think this Aurora side kind of better now, but yeah. I'm pretty sure if you try to use the unit, you will get more damage starting off with the shell side than the aura side because of the buffs transferring to aura's multiple ults, which makes them hit even harder than if you started off with the aura side. I believe there are some exceptions to starting off with the aura side because you want the weakness, of course. Yeah, outside of that weakness, I'm pretty sure it's better to start off with the shell side for the buffs. So this is pretty much just blue shadow but revamped. So yeah, this one is pretty much just Blue Shadow, but revamped. So yeah, this one is pretty much one of the best ones for me. Like, they came and that's pretty much dominated everywhere. Just like how the Shadow and Alpha is doing right now. They came and they dominate, really. 3 OP units, I'm pretty much like my, second favorite or so. Yeah, they just dominate. And then to like, well, the least impactful duo now, Zeta Delta. Now, don't get me wrong, they still came and dominated the game during the 2.5 anniversary and until Shadow and Alpha came, of course. But something is just off about them, in my opinion. That's because it felt like instead of them giving a ton of buffs and to your teammates, they were the ones getting buffed instead. So it's just kind of like, okay, we'll buff you and you do all the work. Like, don't get me wrong, the Zeta side of the unit still does give you some buffs, as you can see here. You get a attack buff, a speed buff, and crit rate and crit attack buff. And then, of course, on gear, you get a speed and damage inflicted buff as well. So you do still get buffs, but it's just not as large as what Shadow and Aura and Pepsi or Epsilon Beta and Shadow and Alpha give. Like, these ones give more buffs. I felt like these ones were just made for more damage. And that's pretty much because of we had gotten an event to support these. The Zeta and Delta do. It was the Bunny event with Bunny Alpha and your team. So yeah, I pretty much believe that was the reason why they were Bunny Alpha and your team were tank and healer. Because they were mostly just buffing this Zeta and Delta duo unit. Now they're still good if you don't have Bunny Alpha and your team, but just not at their full potential really, since that was the build at the time. They dropped those two units to buff. This unit will have come in the anniversary. It was anniversary bait, but also team building at the same time. So yeah, if you have them, well then you pretty much just have this unit at like full power. But if you don't, you do. But if like you don't have the buffers, which are like pretty much every other unit on the team, when they're performing to probably slip. That's the way I say, bro. They were like the worst two, or well, not worst two, but like they just feel like they did the least amount of power creeping and stuff. Like it just feels like they just came and dominated and not really changed a lot compared to the others. They just like came dominated and then just sitting here waiting for Shadow and Alpha to come. They pretty much had the power but not the impact really. Like least impactful do in my opinion. Pretty much just because, as I said before, they were the ones receiving the buff itself, like giving it out to all eyes. Of course, all dudes pretty much hit hard, and like, all of them do have their own domination in the PvP modes. As you have know by now, Epsilon and Beta are like the worst ones because as was saying, they it's pretty simple. They just do a single hit attack and that's just about it. Meanwhile the others they have like paralyze or play with multiple hits. So yeah. Also another thing to note is that you have probably realized that the Shadow and Aura unit relies on like red elemental units. And you could say the same for the green. Can't really say the same, but yeah. Zelta only giving crit rate and buff to green element allies. That's pretty much because compared to like well Epsilon and Beta that does have all allies buffs for like no reason. Well, they do have the crit rate buff if you're blue elemental. Yeah, as you can see, most of their skills have just all ally buffs. This makes them pretty OP, but at the time, there wasn't the element restrictions that we had now. So yeah, like back then, you could pretty much just build any unit in the team, slap any unit, like slap any element, like you could have all four elements in a team and whatnot. And Epsilon Beta would just give a ton of attack and pretty much just make a pure mess at the time of team building and stuff. And so there's pretty much had to put in the element restrictions and like the team building restrictions, which is why you have the 4 DPS and then the 4 DPS penalty and the 2 supporters penalty. And what happens if you don't use the recommended element penalty? So yeah, this unit released before all of that, so that's pretty much why they still seem so impactful, especially in World 3 over here and the various quests of course, because their supporters helps you a ton clear the World 3 floors. So yeah, and even like back then and still now, but of course I do kind of feel a bit weaker as the game gets older, of course. So yeah, in my opinion, you could just say that like Shadow and Alpha is like number one, and then Shadow and R is number two, and like Epsilon and Beta is number three, and then Delta is number four. But at least that's how it is for like me personally. That's just me personally. In a more meta way, things are like shifted up a bit. Probably Epsilon will be last or first, depending on who you ask. And I think Shadow and Alpha will probably be number two. But yeah, the timeline just changes really. The element restrictions, what the meta was back then, all pretty much affect how impactful each one of these two units are. Even though every time a new unit came out, they were pretty much the best in the game. So yeah, that's just my opinion on it. Also, sorry for making this video pretty long. Since because of the hurricane stuff, I didn't really get to make any other one. So yeah, I just figured I'd try to do this and pretty much just, make a like apology video or so by making this one a bit extra longer. So yeah, that's about it for this video, y'all. See you in the next one.